welcome back to another Deep Dive. Looks like we're tackling the whole idea of family, specifically within a Christian context this time. We've got a pretty interesting mix to work with, a whole collection of Bible verses and even a sermon called Temple's Table, Your Family. Should be interesting.
Definitely a rich topic. It's always fascinating to see how these passages offer a glimpse into how the Bible approaches family dynamics, like roles and responsibilities, and all through that lens of faith.
Okay, so jumping right in, the sermon kicks off with Acts 16.31 and then Joshua 24.15. Seems like they're laying down some pretty serious groundwork right from the get-go. What do you think? Why these verses? Why front and center?
Well, you always got to start with the foundation, right? And Acts 16.31, it really highlights this idea that believing, like truly believing, can lead to salvation for an entire household. It's setting the scene for the family as this kind of unified body, under that umbrella of faith.
Yeah.
Then you've got Joshua 24.15, and this one takes it a step further. It's not just about believing as individuals, but about this conscious choice to serve the Lord together.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold statement. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It's like a family mission statement, like a commitment to really building a life centered around faith.
Exactly. And it really makes you think, how would you apply that today? This idea of a household choosing to serve the Lord in today's world, it's pretty profound.
It really is. Okay, so we've got that bedrock of belief established, but both your notes and this sermon point to some specific qualities as being key for a Christian home. And compassion just leaps out, particularly how it's described in Ephesians 4.32. Kindness, tenderheartedness, forgiveness. That's a lot.
It is, but isn't that kind of vital for any family? In a Christian context, it takes on this whole other layer of meaning, right? It's about mirroring the forgiveness that we receive from Christ and offering that same grace to our family members.
A beautiful cycle of forgiveness, flowing from God to us and then outwards. Okay, but the material also dives into a pretty hot topic, raising children. Proverbs 22.6 says, "Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are ill, they will not turn from it." Woof.
It's definitely a powerful directive, and it ties into this idea of planting those seeds of faith early on. But it's not just about telling kids what to do, Ephesians 6.4 comes into play here and really emphasizes parents disciplining and instructing their children, but doing it according to the Lord's teachings.
So it's more about guiding them towards that relationship with God, not just rules for rules' sake.
Exactly. It's about nurturing a faith they can carry with them throughout their lives.
Right. Makes sense. And then, there's the flip side of that parent-child relationship, honoring our parents. It's a direct command in Exodus 20.12. Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you.
That's a powerful statement, right? And it has implications that reach way down childhood. Respect, obedience, caring for our parents, especially as they age, recognizing their role in our lives.
It's about valuing that lifelong bond. Okay, so this is where things get interesting. Both your notes and the sermon spend a good chunk of time on Ephesians 5.21 through 6.4. This whole section lays out specific roles, responsibilities within the family.
Oh yeah, this is a big one. And it often starts a lot of discussion. It's lengthy, but it's crucial. It's really important to approach this carefully. Within the context of that message of love and sacrifice, at its core, this passage is about submission, mutual submission to Christ, but then different types of submission within the family. It lays out the husband as the head of the wife, drawing this parallel to Christ as the head of the church.
Yeah, that's where a lot of people might stumble, The concept of submission can be a tricky one.
Absolutely. And you really have to understand it within this framework of love and service. It's not about endorsing control or a domineering kind of relationship. Husbands are called to love their wives sacrificially, like Christ loved the church and gave himself up for it. And then wives, they're called to respect their husbands.
So it's about recognizing that these roles, while different, are meant to operate within this bigger picture of love and respect.
Exactly. Each role is vital, and they kind of complement each other within a healthy and loving relationship.
Right. And within that, there's the discussion of child obedience as well. Kids are told to obey their parents, which connects back to honoring them, like we were talking about from Exodus. And fathers, they're urged not to exasperate their children, but guide them with loving discipline and instruction, rooted in the Lord's teachings.
It paints this beautiful picture, this family striving to live out their faith in every single aspect of how they relate to each other.
It's inspiring for sure. One thing that really stood out to me was that connection in 1 Timothy 3.4-5 about managing one's household. It's so fascinating how it links that to leadership in the church.
Right, that's a powerful connection. It suggests that the same qualities matter, whether you're leading a family or a church. Responsible leadership, that guidance with love and discipline, earning respect, makes you wonder, how do those principles apply in other areas of life? Work, community involvement, does it translate?
That's a good question, something to think about. And speaking of connections, it seems like the sermon Temple's Table, your family, it really boils these teachings down to a few core concepts.
It does. It emphasizes that a Christian family, it's rooted in these biblical principles. It stresses that marriage, it's ordained by God, held together by these foundational truths. And it's from that base that all the other principles flow.
Right, so it's recognizing that those roles within the family, husband, wife, children, they're defined within Scripture.
Exactly. And applying these principles, especially in today's world, it requires thoughtful interpretation, a lot of discernment, and a healthy dose of grace. It's not about rigid legalism, It's about striving to live these teachings in a way that truly honors God and reflects his love.
It's about finding that balance right, living out these teachings within the complexities of modern family life.
Absolutely. And, I think the sermon is guiding us toward an even bigger view of family as we move on to the next section. We've explored the inner workings, the Christian household, but now it's like we're stepping outside those walls.
You're right. It's like establishing that solid foundation and now looking outward.
Yeah, expanding that circle of love and grace. We're going to dig into some of those specific teachings from Temple's Table and see how they challenge us to live out these principles, not just within our families, but out in the world. I'm curious to see where this goes.
Me too.
It's like we're taking those foundational principles from inside the home and starting to build bridges outwards. And the sermon, it starts by really emphasizing this idea of love within marriage, highlighting Malachi 2.16. It's a pretty strong warning against divorce if there isn't love, really hitting hard on the whole faithfulness thing.
It's a good reminder that marriage isn't just like a contract. It's more like a covenant, a sacred promise. Entering into it with that reverence and committing to loving and cherishing each other no matter what.
Exactly. And that commitment, it goes beyond just words. It's got to be demonstrated, right? Through actions, through that constant loyalty and faithfulness, creating that space where each person feels loved and valued and respected.
It's about showing up consistently, day after day. And then the sermon kind of shifts gears a little bit to a more practical side of family life, bringing up 1 Timothy 5.8 and the responsibility to provide for your family.
Yeah, that verse has some pretty striking language. Neglecting to provide for your family is worse than being an unbeliever. Pretty intense. It really underscores how seriously that duty is viewed, the husband's responsibility to care for his wife and kids.
It's a big reminder that love isn't passive. It's about action, putting their needs before their own, making sure they're cared for physically and spiritually.
Being a leader, providing, being that source of strength and stability. And then it's interesting how the sermon connects this back to the creation story, Genesis 2.1820, talking about God creating woman as a helper fit for man. Highlighting that partnership, the interdependence.
Yeah, it's recognizing that each partner brings something unique and valuable to the table, and those roles, they complement each other. It's like two sides of the same coin working together.
Not about one being better or anything like that, but appreciating their distinct strengths and how they contribute to the partnership. And then we come to the sermon's conclusion where it focuses on that description of the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31.10-12.
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful passage. Praising her trustworthiness, her hard work, her kindness, her wisdom. I love that part where it says she's worth more than rubies. It's such a powerful image of this woman using her gifts to bless her family and everyone around her.
Yeah, it really drives home that point that everyone in the family has something valuable to offer. And when everyone embraces their role, lives it out with love and faithfulness, you create something really beautiful, something strong.
Like weaving all those threads together, this tapestry of love and strength. A reflection of God's love.
It really is like a tapestry, all of the individual threads woven together, It's amazing how the sermon circles back to the beginning, that idea of choosing to serve the Lord. But it's not just this personal decision, it's a call to action.
A commitment to live out your faith in a way that actually impacts the world. Yeah, I like that. So we've reached the end of our deep dive. We've covered a lot. We've explored those different roles and responsibilities, the importance of faith, and those specific qualities that make a Christian family strong. What do you think is the most significant takeaway for our listener? What's that one thing you hope they really grasp?
I think for me, it's about recognizing that Building a Christian family, it's intentional. It's not something that just happens, you know? It takes commitment to those biblical principles, a willingness to actually put those teachings into practice, and constantly relying on God for guidance.
It's about making faith that cornerstone of your family life, letting those teachings really shape how you act, the decisions you make. And that's where grace comes in, like the sermon mentioned. It's not about being perfect, but about striving to live out those principles in a way that honors God. And realizing, we're going to fall short sometimes.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not a destination. We're all going to make mistakes along the way. But that's the beautiful thing about God's grace. It covers those imperfections. He meets us right where we are and helps us grow.
And it's about offering that same grace to our families, right? Understanding that none of us are perfect, but we're all trying, all striving for that ideal, that Christ-centered home.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes these scriptures so powerful. It's not about some unattainable standard or, rigid rules. It's about love and forgiveness and growth within the context of sharing your faith.
Creating that space where everyone feels loved and supported and encouraged to grow in their faith. So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a little something to think about. We've talked a lot about building strong families, families rooted in faith, but how can we extend that love and support beyond our immediate circle? How can we be that source of strength and encouragement, maybe for people who don't have that same foundation? How can we be the hands and feet of Christ, extending his love and grace to those who are hurting, who are lost?
That's a great question. And I think it all comes back to that idea of choosing to serve the Lord.
We hope this deep dive has given you a fresh perspective on these scriptures, maybe even inspired you to think about how you can build a family that honors God and reflects his love out there in the world. Keep searching, keep learning, and keep that conversation going.